judge your forms and few shines beyond all known.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Artists United Television. My name is Holly Million, and I'm the founder and executive director of Artists United. Artists United is a nonprofit organization based in Oakland, California, and working throughout the United States and worldwide. And we're aiming to build the largest network of artists in all disciplines that the world has ever seen. And we're well on our way with 33,000 members signed up and a goal of reaching 100,000 members by the end of the year. Our purpose in doing this work is to help artists to create excellent art by allowing them to share resources, tools, and connections with each other, as well as moral support. So none of us ever has to work alone again as an artist. And in addition, by harnessing the power of this many artists, we hope to be able to advocate more for our own rights and to harness the power of art for social justice, environmental sanity, peace, and all the things that all of us benefit from. So this show is about featuring the diverse voices and members of our community, our partners, and artists who are doing excellent work already and have much to share and offer to our members. And so today on the show, I'm so honored and proud to feature Ross Chaney, whom I met recently at the Culture Shift conference in New Mexico, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, at the end of October. When I was departing the conference and leaving a theater where people were gathering, Ross was walking in as I was walking out. And we have a common friend in Christine Maltrid of ArtSpark, who is on the advisory board of Artists United. And Christine was kind enough to introduce me to Ross, and now here he is on the show. I'm so happy to have you, Ross. Thanks for being here.
Holly, it is wonderful to be here as well. Thank you very much.
Well, I learned a little bit more about your story recently, Ross, and I was fascinated. I'm wondering if you could just tell a little bit of an overview of your bio, which is incredible, to share with our audience.
Absolutely. Let me give you a little bit of a thumbnail of my background. So right now I have the privilege of sitting and living and working in Santa Fe, New Mexico, the high desert mountains. We're at 7,500 feet above sea level. And right now I'm watching it snow out of my window. You all can't see it, but I can. We've gotten a lot of snow this year. But to go back to the beginning of my personal story, I started my life, my first memories were living on the Osage Nation Reservation in Oklahoma in the capital called Pawhuska. And Pawhuska is a Osage word. It means long white hair. And so my mother moved me to Tulsa, Oklahoma to go to better public schools so I could get a good education. And it was through her vision and her wisdom and her diligence that I was able to go to college and then to go to grad school and then to go to a second graduate program as a Woodrow Wilson Fellow under the International Affairs and Public Policy Initiative. And so it was a dream of mine to study internationally, and that fellowship made it happen. And so the other side of that is I always found that I had an artistic and visual draw, but also ability. And one of the things that informs that is I have severe dyslexia. So as most people know, but if you don't, dyslexics are visual people. That's why traditional school is very hard, because lectures are very difficult for us to absorb. But if you show us a picture, we can retain, remember, and engage that a lot. And so I think you see that a lot with dyslexics of entrepreneurs, because we have to become creative problem solvers. And so it takes us in many different directions that, let's say, folks that don't have these challenges maybe wouldn't take, because they can take the usual route. So I've learned to become accustomed to taking different routes to achieve my goal. And so I find myself here in Santa Fe, New Mexico. After I completed graduate school, I worked in Tokyo, Japan for a consulting firm. And then I came back to the United States and I worked for Lucent Technologies and Bell Laboratories as a manager in global corporate strategy, forecasting, and then I also did technical marketing and sales for the optical networking group of Lucent Technologies. And I did all this to get the education and the business experience to come back to my community or a small community and support not only the community, but specifically other Native Americans like myself that needed help within economic development, because the theory at the time as a teenager was Native nations have all the duties of any other nation: education, healthcare, public policy. And one of the things I wanted to see was to strengthen our tribal governments, as well as provide better support for the children and youth of our tribe. And I thought the best way I could do that was to the economic development area. But as you can see behind me, I have some of my paintings here. And so Santa Fe is very famous for being a creative, artistic place to come, if you will. And so once I got here, I decided, okay, now I can kind of not let go of the corporate training, but start to embrace the artistic ability that I kind of put to the side while I was getting all that other experience. Is that a pretty good?
That's a wonderful overview. I was amazed when I heard your story the first time, and I'm even still amazed as I hear it again the second time. And I just love the fact that you've had so much eclectic experience in many different sectors. And I think that's wonderful as far as like equipping you to be a teacher of other artists about how to increase their chances of being successful as artists, as insofar as knowing how to run their art practice more like a business, maybe having a sense of organizational structure, things that would be helpful. So you're moving into being an artist full time. Is that the direction that you're heading in? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, that's all. I think it's always the dream of most artists. Would be, this is my job. This is my day job. Unfortunately, I haven't made that transition yet, and it is extremely difficult. And just to balance out what you said, that's one of the ironies of my particular artwork, is that I use less of my business hat for my own artwork, because one of the many roles I play in this community is I'm an advisor to entrepreneurs, mentor, coach, looking at their financials, looking at their strategy, helping them develop all these different aspects of their own business. But one of the things that I wanted to do in my artwork was not make artwork just to sell, to give a particular audience exactly what they wanted. I wanted to make and show art that I wanted to make and show, regardless whether it's sold or not. And so early on, I figured out this strategy of, okay, I've kind of got two paths to go towards. One is, and I deeply respect and have a lot of friends that go this route, that do the weekend shows, that do the national shows, that really put everything they have into making art their career and their livelihood. And so the other direction that I saw for myself, because at the time, traditionally it takes so long to make that transition, from my experience, or a lot of times you'll see that people teach to have that base income, and then that allows them the freedom as well as the income to go and do the artwork that they want to do. So I'm really at a crossroads right now with the artwork that I've done. It was a private practice of mine for many years. No one saw it, which was great because it allowed me a tremendous amount of freedom, because I wasn't going to show it, I wasn't going to sell it. And then once I started showing it around 2009, I decided that my audience was really in the area of fine art, museums, curators, and that type of direction. And so the trade-off is I made less sales, but I got great exposure. I received 2 residencies, 1 fellowship from the Harpo Foundation. So I want to give a shout out to them for supporting Native American artists. They sent me to Vermont Studio Center. And because I studied international affairs, international business, I never had just a month to say, hey, here's a gigantic studio, 24/7, do whatever you want. I made so much artwork, they gave me 2 studios.
Wow. That sounds like a dream come true. I know all of us who are artists would just love to have that opportunity. How wonderful.
And not only that, but also what I found with that particular cohort that year was the artists that I made connections with, because they not only took visual artists, but writers, installation artists, poets, you name it. And so I still keep in contact many years later, and those folks still come to Santa Fe to visit me, and I go to their homes to visit them. So that's a tremendous opportunity if you've never done something like that, to go to an artist colony and spend a month with this tremendous amount of folks. And Vermont's View Center has folks from all over the world. So we had folks from Nepal, we had folks from Korea, Japan, of course, all over the United States, Canada. So it is a really fantastic program.
And then you came back with all this art. Have you been selling the art? Is this going into the museums?
That's a great question. So one of the things is, being Native American, I decided to go into Native American art shows. And so in 2010, I was accepted into the Santa Fe Indian Market, which is the largest Native American art show in the country, and it is the biggest art event in New Mexico. These are old numbers, but I believe it brings in around $100 million in 1 week, and over $20 million is sold just of art in that 1 week. And so quickly realized that my audience was going to be these curators. And so what happened was I was able to get these residencies, and I was also able to get into permanent collections of museums. But I wasn't selling a lot of artwork. So I thought, well, that's the trade-off. I'll sell less artwork, but I'll be able to engage in a discussion not only with that community, but also I was showing artwork in these shows that were not typical. If you can tell behind me, particularly the one right here, it's more abstract, very colorful. Most of the bulk of my work is mixed media on paper. Because I lived in Japan, I'm really influenced by the Japanese aesthetic. I used to be able to read and write and speak Japanese when I lived there. And so I was showing artwork that the audience was really surprised and sometimes shocked by. Literally told me that this didn't belong here. This art belongs in New York, or this art belongs someplace else. And I would smile and look at them with the thought of, and yet you're seeing it in this show. And so I not only wanted to influence the audience, but I also wanted to influence the other artists in the show to take risks, to explore what they wanted to show that may or may not sell to the audience that was having certain expectations. And so I served in the Artistic Standards Committee for Santa Fe Indian Market, which is under the nonprofit SWIA, Southwest Indian Arts Association. And so I'm hopeful, I'm not taking full credit for this, but I'm hopeful that I had influence in supporting the organization and supporting the artists to take risks and explore other areas beyond what the market was expecting. So that's one of the things that I like to do where I go in the sense of, one of the common terms is like a change agent. Mm-hmm. I introduce these new things and then see what happens from it, because, you know, a lot of people don't like change. It makes them uncomfortable, but some people get ignited by it, and it may take a little bit for them to start to accept it, but once they see someone else is taking a risk, I think it encourages them to also explore something that they may not have before.
That's wonderful. So what I'm going to ask you is a very direct question about this expectation thing, because all of us as artists face some of that, right? There's some expectations, but in this case, I think, are you saying that Native artists, it's expected that they do art on a Native subject or in a Native theme or a Native style, and it sort of pigeonholes everyone into that category? Is that kind of what you were talking about? Is that what you came up against?
Absolutely, absolutely. We use the term Native iconography, and so I give you examples of teepees, buffaloes, warriors with painted faces, this type of motifs. That is mostly plains. So, and this is a factor of, you know, media, all the Westerns that came up for many decades and still going on, that portrays the Native Americans and mostly focuses on the plain style. Now, of course, the collectors, more astute collectors, understand that there are Pueblo designs, Navajo, Apache, Pacific Northwest, so on and so on, because people may not realize there are over 500 federally recognized tribes in the United States. And we all have some similarities within our linguistic basis, like Athabascan or the Siouan language, but we also have our own way of interpreting those bases for our own communities and our own cultures and our own languages. And so I think the market really expects to see that type of thing when they come to this, or come to something like the Santa Fe Indian market, for example.
So did you feel that you were successful in changing people's awareness? Did you find that there were people that you had some great interactions with that were very supportive of what you were doing?
I did, but it's not always a linear correlation. It's something that you just have to observe. Mm-hmm. Because it's not like a project where you say, okay, we got some funding and we're going to do these things and we're going to have these metrics. And at the end of the project, we're going to show you our qualitative and quantitative metrics to see what the experiment did. These were self-funded experiments that I did. I wasn't trying to measure any metrics because I didn't have to for a funder. So it's more qualitative, to where I saw folks that I showed with experimenting with their imagery that was kind of similar to mine. And so I took that as a sign of, great pride. They're like, okay, I show with Ross and I'm showing what I usually show, but let me experiment with something that he's doing with maybe the Japanese inks or paper or images that don't really fit what I've been doing. Indian market eventually started and focused on a contemporary section. Now, I in no way would take credit for that, but I would say that I had some influence in helping them realize that is needed and that there's an audience there. Because as we're seeing probably in a lot of different art markets, the audience is shifting. The boomers are getting older, their collections are kind of full. They have certain expectations of what their current collections are. And the millennials are out there, but they can't afford some of the type of art that we sell in order to make a living to keep paying the bills. So it's an interesting time within art. It's an interesting time within America and our society with the transitions of generations.
Where do you think this is trending, though, as far as visual artists making a living with their art? Is there a need to adapt how you're doing the art? Is there a need to do things that are more online, that can be purchased, or prints rather than full canvases? What do you think is the direction that this is going in? Do you have some advice for those who are coming up, maybe some of the younger artists trying to find their way?
Yeah, I think for some of the artists that I know here that have made a living at it, they are very focused. They are very diligent. Like I said, they are doing the weekend shows, they're doing the national shows, but they also are developing a niche within their audience, as well as the type of art that they make. And that was one area that I wasn't ready to say, okay, I am going to make this type of art for the rest of my life because that's what my audience wants. And once I make that, that's what they're going to expect. And so for me, it didn't help me get a gallery. Not that that was my goal, but I think for a lot of artists, the gallery is expecting very consistent work, so the audience knows immediately without seeing the signature, oh yes, I know who did that. And so what I've seen the artists that have made a living is they make consistent work. They work their butt off in every possible aspect to get this work seen and to show the work and to get the exposure. One of the most difficult challenges, though, I think for the artists is where to spend your time. And I've heard this from several of, well, I did a blog and I did the social media and I did these photographs and all of this time spent on it, and they really couldn't quantify if that had a major impact. And so I saw the frustration in them, and I was wondering, well, on one level, you have to do some form of social media, because if people look you up and you don't have an Instagram, they're like, oh, this person doesn't have an Instagram, but they're not serious. But at the same time, do you really need to start a blog and do a weekly writing assignment, which being dyslexic, that would be an extreme challenge for me. So I really think it's once you've decided what your art aesthetic is, that you stick with that, that you really market that directly to the shows, the galleries, and the audience you're looking for, as well as finding collaborators that are really going to support you in doing that, making introductions, telling you how they got into a particular show, all these kind of things that they don't list on the website to say, this is how you really start to progress within the community and the market.
Right. So going broad is not what serves us. It's not scattering yourself out there on the internet. It's not, it's the direct relationship building. Is that what I'm hearing? Because that's what I've found to be true in my own work as a filmmaker as well.
Absolutely. And I think even more so right now, it is direct relationship, because the folks have to really know who you are and know your consistency, know that you'll deliver, know that you have a level of integrity with your artwork and your business dealings, so that they don't have to worry about that. They know when the time comes, you're supposed to show up with 5 paintings or 6 sculptures or whatever it is. You show up with exactly what they expect, on time, and that way they can be a reference, and they'll start to introduce you to other folks because you have got that relationship and that consistency built in.
I also am hearing what you're saying, Ross, about just being dedicated and committed to what really moves you personally and not chasing after something. And I know that's so scary in the beginning when you're starting, because you feel like you have to, by whatever means necessary, sell, make a living, do whatever. But if you're patient, it sounds like if you're really true to yourself and true to what calls to you, that ultimately that is what serves best, because then you'll have the joy of creating what you want, and you will find your audience in time.
Absolutely. And I'm not discouraging and disparaging anyone that wants to make this a business. And like any business, like I said, you have to have that consistency, and you have to understand business aspects of what it's going to cost to go to these shows. What do I need to buy a trailer? Do I need to buy a truck? All of these things that are very business directed, that are not really on the creative side at all. And if that's what you want, and I know people here that have made a decent living doing that, but they are very consistent, and they're giving the market what the market wants. And so I wasn't ready to sign up for that, because my art kept shifting and going different directions, and it was very personal. And so I got to a place to where it was safe for me to show it, and you could throw rocks at it, eggs at it. You could say, "Oh, it looks like a child did it." I always took that as a compliment.
I think so too. Children do great art.
Well, they're so free. There's no hang up. It's pure. It's going directly into whatever their black and white concrete abilities are. They're not able to do abstraction just yet. And so, so I consciously took that direction to say, yeah, I'm going to take a risk. This is probably going to cost me money, but at the end of the day, that's okay, because that's what I want to get out of it.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that. It's great testimony for those who are listening who want to follow in that path. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the art that's behind you. I'm so fascinated by it. I keep looking at the pieces. They're really dynamic and so colorful. Maybe you can explain one or more of them, what they are, and what inspired you to create that.
Certainly. Like I said, the bulk of my work is mixed media on paper, Japanese inks. Got into some hand-cut paper stencils. I use a lot of simile ink. I usually pour the ink directly on the paper, and I let gravity determine what image is going to come out. And so it's a little bit of alchemy, it's a little bit of luck, but it's also kind of an underlying theme of I'm not completely in control. And so it mirrors my understanding of life. Because we would like to be completely in control of our jobs and our houses and all that, but we're not. And so it kind of pushes past that illusion of like, well, I have control of the gravity of the paper, but I don't have control of where the ink is flowing. And then after I started doing several shows, you get feedback, you get interactions with other artists that went to art school, that have formal training, and it's kind of challenging because they put their art school hat on and they want to critique your work, and I'm open and I listen to it, but I didn't go to art school, so I don't know the rules, and I don't have to follow those rules because I can do what I want. And so about 9 years ago or so, I really started to focus on painting on canvas with acrylic paint. And so what you see behind me are paintings on canvas, but they're mixed media. They're acrylic paint, they're oil pastel, oil stick. Some of them may have a little bit of ink or semi-ink on them. And depending, and I say this a lot to folks that buy my work or see my work, it's not done until it leaves my possession. So what you see behind me could change until it goes off to a new home or somewhere else. But specifically, the one on this shoulder is an experiment. I love color, as you can see. I really love the color pink, this color.
I can see that's been your paint smock before.
Right. I was wondering what to wear on the show, and I thought, you know what, I'll just wear this.
I love that. I want one of those, actually. Filmmakers don't get to put that on their shirt, so it's like, that's cool.
Thank you very much. Also, I don't know if the viewers can see, but this is a handprint.
Yeah.
And that's actually a very definitive symbol of the Osage people, which I'm a member of. And in the Osage language, it's called Wajaji. So we are a Sioux band of Native American people, Plains tribe, originally from Missouri, Kansas, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. And just a side note on that tribe, because I'm also a member of the Cherokee Nation, which is Eastern Woodlands from Georgia, North Carolina. But on the Sioux side, folks don't know that we basically controlled a big portion of the Louisiana Purchase territory. And when America bought that from the French, America set up Fort Osage in Missouri to establish diplomatic and military relations with the Osage people, because they could not beat us, and we were the military power. And so they had to be diplomatic with my people. So we're one of the few tribes that our land wasn't taken, it was purchased and negotiated to where we bought an entire county in Osage and Oklahoma called Osage County. So back to the artwork. The one here that you see is a little bit unusual for me, and I think that's the fourth painting on that particular canvas over about a year and a half or 2 years, to where there is some iconography on there, but it's relating to a very layered story. So I think you can see
Yes.
that there's an oil well pump head
Yes.
within the background. So as a little boy on the Osage Reservation, they found out really early in the early 1900s that it had one of the largest oil deposits in North America. And on either side of the reservation, here's the reservation. Here was the headquarters for Phillips Petroleum, and here was the headquarters for Conoco Petroleum. So Sinclair, Getty, all the major oil companies bought some of their initial leases off of Osage oil land. And at the time in the 1920s, we were actually the richest per capita people in the world. We had a Rolls Royce dealership on the res.
Wow. Yeah. For a while, that was the case.
It was the case, and so there's some scuttlebutt in the film world that Leonardo DiCaprio and a few others are going to make a film about this particular era, because there was so much money. It was called the Osage Murders. People were coming in, intermarrying with tribal members, and then they were murdering the tribal members and inheriting real royalties.
Oh. Whoa.
And
I've
so,
never heard this story. That's something that needs to be
and,
told.
and many people haven't. There's been a couple of books written about it. And as I said, there's some scuttlebutt that there's going to be a major motion picture starting to film this summer about these murders. And one of the interesting things about it was, and a lot of people don't know this either, in the Major Crimes Act, the FBI gets involved on tribal land and tribal issues. It's not city cops, it's not state cops, it goes directly to the FBI. So when these murders started happening, the FBI got involved. And this is one of the first times that FBI forensics was developed to basically track down who was organizing, who was leading, and how were they pulling off all of these murders, because it was just too numerous. They were literally dynamiting homes on the Osage Reservation. And so this was an evolution of the FBI, and that is part of the story of our people.
That's incredible. Wow. I'm so fascinated by everything you're telling me. This interview's gone in so many directions, Ross. We're definitely going to be talking more, and I can't wait to see more. I hope that film does come out, because this is part of our shared history, and we need to know what has happened. But wonderful that you made a painting about the oil country, and the boy in the foreground is very moving. I saw that image from earlier in the interview, and I was wondering what was going on there. So thank you for that description. And the other painting you were going to describe earlier, and then we got diverted. What is that representing? Is that something in particular?
It's pure abstraction.
Mm-hmm.
It's purely playing with color and motion and movement. And I think that's maybe the second or third painting on that canvas over about a year and a half. And so really just, and that's a lot of times where I like to start is there is no concept, there is no idea. I pick up a color, I pick up a brush, and we go to work and see what happens and see what unfolds. And then the one above me is a triptych I did of basically busts of what I call the three fathers. And so we all have certain relationships, whether we knew our fathers or not. And so, what is all those different relationships, as a child, as an adult, if your father has passed, or if your father was absent. And so it's something a little bit unusual to where I go into the oil well and, really specifically looking at people as opposed to abstraction, because most of my work is abstract, to where I want to see what the folks that view it see. And because a lot of times I get completely different reactions. And so it always fascinates me to understand what they see.
That's so wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your art. And it's clear to me that each piece is completely different and unique, and it's just so well done. And so thank you first of all, for sharing it, but also just telling your story, Ross, and explaining how you've made it to this place in your career. I'm really hopeful that you are able to get your art into more museums and more into the world, and that you realize your dreams. I think you're well on your way, and it's been fantastic having you on the show. I wanted to ask you if there's anything you haven't touched on so far that you might want to share with the viewers, any advice, any insights before I finish up our interview.
Yeah, just a few things in closing. As you can tell, I'm a very eclectic person. Some people would call me a generalist, because I love to do anything and everything. But one of the things that I have learned through my personal journey is the importance of empathy. And I think this is really important with our political climate and the division and the divisiveness we see in this country and around the world, and understanding the importance of empathy and what empathy is. Also, the importance of creating safe space for people to come together. And so I've done this in many different ways. I've been a children's grief counselor for 14 years as a volunteer for all age groups. And the premise of that is creating safe space to talk about their grief. And we use art and play and story and poetry so they can express themselves. So I wanted to emphasize that, and I've given talks in Santa Fe to say, I'm agnostic about the topic, but what I want the community to do is to create a safe space on whatever topic they want to talk about, whether it's grief or art, and then hold that space so we can have and share our own experiences, so we know we're not alone, so we can also exhibit and experience empathy and compassion. Because I really believe, after working in the public policy arena for nearly 15 years with the legislature, the governor, the mayors, actually working for them, that for a short time frame to get things done, it's really about people and connecting people. And policy is great, but it takes too long to change policy. So what I try and do is create safe spaces to bring in people to make those connections so they can decide, how do we work together and how do we help each other move forward?
Thank you so much, Ross. I'm just smiling ear to ear because as you're talking, I'm like, this is a man who's one of us. He's an Artists United guy. And we're going to have to talk about how do we collaborate more, because that is, in fact, the Artists United mission. We're trying to create a safe place where artists can come together and support each other. And everything you said resonated. I want people to not feel that they're alone. I want them to feel that they are actually very powerful. They have many resources that they can share. We all have things we can give to each other, and that we need to come together in a way that supports everyone. So thank you for saying that. Artists United is a worldwide movement of artists in all disciplines, including visual artists, painters, writers, theater people, animators, graphic designers, sculptors, musicians, and artists of all types coming together worldwide. And we're in 25 different countries. We have 33,000 members signed up, and we're trying to harness the power of all these artists coming together to do good, both for the artists so that they can create more art and have more support, just naturally tapping into the vast knowledge, resources, and passion that we have as a group, but also putting us into a position where we can be leaders in a society that's desperately in need of new leadership and enlightened leadership. And by having a large network, we suddenly gain advocacy power, economic power, political power, and then we can use our power not only to elevate each other and our field, but also our world. And we would very much like anyone who's watching this show to join us. You can do so by simply signing up on our email list at artistsunited.net. That's artistpluralunited.net. Please join us, become a free member, and become part of the solution. I want to thank Ross Chaney for being here today, for inspiring me, and for sharing his wisdom with our viewers. Ross, you're a force for good in the world. Thank you so much for being here.
It was an honor and a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
And we'll have you back, I know, for sure. All right, take care, everybody.